Well, hello and welcome to Mokuzai Design. My name is Nick. Today we're going to be looking at the Veritas Mk II Deluxe honing guide set. Now we will go through setting these honing guides up. We will go through how to use them, and we will go through basically whether I'm pleased with my purchase or not. I have bought these with my own money. Apparently you're supposed to say that in YouTube world. But yeah, they are expensive, but were they worth the cost? We'll find out. Before we get there though, I'd like to go through a little bit of back history for you so that you understand my thought process. Now it may come as a bit of a shock, but I am over the age of 21. And when I was learning woodwork, back in the dark ages, the wheel had been invented, but electricity, that was still on dodgy ground. Now, when I was learning, everything I learned in a workshop was from my father or my uncle. And that's how it was, and it was done through repetition. It was cutting dovetails for hours on end, sawing woods in straight lines for pieces of wood in straight lines for hours on end, making sure that they were happy. And when they were happy, I can assure you I was thrilled. But one of my other tasks, as I got a little bit more experience, was sharpening their chisels and sharpening their plane blades. And I would try to give them back to them, but they wouldn't accept them until they were absolutely, in their eyes, perfect. So I would have to keep going back and forth until I got it right. And that repetition has paid me dividends. Now again, back in those days, I hadn't even heard of a honing guide. It was all done by hand on a stone. And it was something that it was a skill that I'm glad that I learned. Okay, I will say that. But to my mind, I mean, the world has progressed, precision has progressed. There's nothing more accurate than a honing guide compared to two fatty pads on the end of your fingers. Now, some people will tell you, oh, you're supposed to feel the blade, and I just don't agree with that. If you've got a mechanical tool that precisely puts an edge on your plane blade or your chisel the same way every single time, you've got to be on for a winner. Now, it's not just for beginners, it's for experienced woodworkers alike. That's how it is. Okay, let's get into having a little look at the Veritas system. 5 pieces to this. There's 2 here, and 1 here. And that's the way that the system comes to you in the Deluxe setting. You only get this one if you just buy in the standard version. But there's a good reason to buy the Deluxe version if you can possibly afford it. Let's look at the first unit. Now the first unit, you can see the vice part is across here. And when you introduce a tool, you would simply clamp that down. There is a marking gauge here, which is corresponding to plane blade sizes more than it is to chisel. Now what they were finding is, it didn't matter how far you tightened that, when you were putting a chisel into it, the grip, because it's only gripping this little bit here, wasn't sufficient, and the chisel could move. It didn't happen with plane blades because the plane blade being wider had a much more grip factor to it. So Veritas brought out this little beauty where the grips are different, the vice part is different. And when you introduced a chisel there, it's got a central screw, and basically that just tightens on the sides of the chisel and gives a much tighter, firmer grip. There's absolutely no movement in that at all. And it's a much better grip, much more ideal for your chisels. And that's why I bought the Deluxe set, was because it gave me both options. So whilst the tops are different, so are the rollers. Now this has got a flat roller on it, and as you can see, when you would be sharpening, it would simply, they would be this way around, but you would simply be rolling it, and it keeps it very square to the chisel and square to your cutting implement. Whereas this one has got a convex roller, so when you're rolling with this one, you can actually move it from side to side as well. So you can put a shape onto a plane blade should you require one. Obviously, you wouldn't use that necessarily with a chisel. There's no reason to put a shape on a chisel blade, but there certainly is when it comes to plane blades. So how do we know that we're going to be sharpening the blade at the correct angle? As we said, it was easy when we found it with our fingers. But how do we do it on this? And that's quite simple. You'll notice on here you've got yellow and green. Yellow is number 2, green is number 3. And on here you've got 1, 2 and 3. Red for number 1, yellow for number 2, the same as this one, and green number 3, the same as this one. And then on the setup guide, you'll notice that there are numbers in red, yellow and green. And now you've got your high angles, your standard angles and your back bevels. Now I've got this set up on the yellow setting, which is the standard setting, and I'm going to be wanting to sharpen my blade. This is set for 25 degrees, so I've set this machine for 25 degrees. Now all I need to do is introduce this to this. Once that's on, I can now introduce my chisel. Okay, and I can just tighten it up slightly, not all the way just yet. Now the chisel is meeting my guide, and I can move that over slightly so it's parallel with the guide itself, and make sure that's tightened off. And then all I need to do is simply loosen the guide and take it away. Now I know that when I go to sharpen, my blade is set at 25 degrees. But how does that have to change when I want to put my secondary bevel on? Now I don't have to adjust the chisel at all. On the side here there's a small knob, and it's got a little indent on it. At the moment it's pointed up to 12 o'clock. All I would do is move that round to 6 o'clock. And once it's at 6 o'clock, what that's done is it's raised it ever so slightly, and that would allow me then to put my secondary bevel on nice and square. So in a very small nutshell, that's it. That's how you set them up. Now you might think to yourself, well, you haven't got into in depth on that video, is there, about how you set these things up? To be honest with you, there's no reason to. They are a superb bit of kit. They come with good instructions. There are videos that go in depth that you can look at if you're serious about buying one. And the truth of the matter is, you will, when you first get it, you'll put the chisel in upside down, etc., etc., and it's a matter of playing around with it whilst you get used to it. But that's a very, very, very short learning span. It is a fantastic bit of kit. It is very precise. Now, I've got a brand new set of Narix chisels here, which I'm going to be sharpening in my next video, taking them from out of the box to sharp. Now, what I did was I basically got some old chisels that I've been using for opening tins of paint and things, and I've done one here. This is an old, battered old thing. I don't even know where it came from, but it's put a lovely bevel on here. Primary bevel. It's put a lovely secondary bevel, and trust me, it is sharp. Now that's down to, you could say, well, that's down to the sharpening system. Yes, it is, but what I have managed to, if I could show you a close-up of that, I would, but it doesn't show on camera. I did try. What it does do is make sure that those bevels are beautifully square all the time. As I said earlier, 2 pads of the fingers, on dodgy ground. Mechanical tool that's precise, absolutely fantastic. Now, when I was going back to my youth yet again, I was always told 2 things. If you look after your tools will look after you. And secondly, there's nothing more dangerous in a workshop than a blunt tool. So keeping your tools sharp in an easy fashion, to me, is priceless, because it's not cheap. It's not a cheap system. Can't pretend it is. But is it worth it? To my mind's eye, yes, it is worth it. But I don't see it as spending money. I see it as an investment in my woodwork. Okay, until the next video, take care.